We recorded just a short while ago. I want to begin by saying perhaps some of you have seen images of farmers protesting. Perhaps some of you have seen those acrimonious and unruly scenes in the parliament yesterday when those two bills were passed in Rajya Sabha. I want to begin by saying how those bills were passed by a voice vote or by muting those proceedings is not the focus of this particular conversation. The political play is not the focus of my conversation today. We are going to try and make sense of the farm bills. From all that I have read and I have spoken to and I have understood, I'm seeing two very diametrically opposing or opposite views, and both make sense to me a little bit. Both seem valid in parts. I have with me today an incredible guest. I'm being joined by Devinder Sharma. I couldn't think of a person better suited to try and explain this to us. He's a trained agricultural scientist. He writes on food. He writes on food and trade policy. And I remember, Devinderji, I read something of yours ages ago, and I think it was called Muthi Bhar Dano Ke Liye. Would that be correct?
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
So I want to welcome you, but I also want to say that please think of us as students while explaining this issue to us. I'm sure some of my viewers know this much better than I do. We are listening and we genuinely want to try and understand what's at stake here, stripping all the politics of it away. Before I start this conversation with you, Devinderji, I thought I'll try and simplify these ordinances because the names are so big. So I've taken the help of the agricultural economist, Sudha Narayanan, and the Indian Express research team. So we simply know what we are talking about when you refer to those ordinances. So just for our viewers, every time you hear this big long name, the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Ordinance 2020, think of it as APMC bypass. Devinder sir will explain to us what APMC means, but every time we refer to APMC bypass, we're looking at the first ordinance. The second one is the Essential Commodities Amendment Ordinance. Of course, they're on their way to become a bill. Every time we say food stocking or freedom of food stocking, we're referring to this second one. And the third one, another long name, the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Ordinance. Every time we refer to contract farming, we are referring to this third one. So with that preface, I want to begin this conversation, sir. We'll talk about the first ordinance, the APMC ordinance. The government's focus is simply this much, that on paper, it will allow farmers to sell their produce to places other than APMC regulated mandis. I think for starters, we need to understand what is an APMC mandi and what technically happens here.
First of all, thank you very much, Anubha, for inviting me to this show of yours. And I was very keenly looking forward to that. When will Anubha give me a chance to come on our show? So thank you very much. The question that you have posed, I think, is very important because people need to understand the basics before they start forming their opinion. I think I find in much of the debate that is going around, people are not even aware of the basics, and that is what is compounding the confusion that we see around or floating all around. Your question as to what is APMC. APMC is acronym for Agriculture Produce Market Committee Act, which is an act Government of India enacted sometimes in 1965-66. In fact, I think in 1965 they set up a committee to ascertain, find out, how we could provide a market, a regulated market for the farmers. Because if you remember, prior to 1965, when if you look at the days after the independence in 1947, India was a country living in ship-to-mouth existence when food was coming under PL 480 from North America, and that was being shipped right to India and then going straight into the hungry mouths. So the Government of India was trying different permutation combinations to emerge out of the crisis, and one recommendation was that we should set up a regulated markets where they are not, the producer is not left to be exploited by the middleman and traders and so on. Okay. And so they regulatory system which is laid out. And the objective was, when we bring in the green revolution technology, if the production goes up as was anticipated, then what will happen is, at the time of the harvest, the prices would crash. That has been the historical example that we have. Prices would crash, and that would mean it wouldn't provide any incentive to the farmer to continue with that kind of productivity or production system. So he would move out. The green revolution emphasis is lost. And I think this was a remarkable strategy that the government of India laid out. And I must compliment the policymakers at that time. And what MS Swaminathan once called it as 2 planks of famine avoidance strategy. And I'm sure you will remember that we haven't had famine after the green revolution began. And let me explain. These 2 things was that, one, of course, when the farmer brings the produce to the mandis, the prices have crashed. That is a time when the private trade is allowed to first step in and buy whatever the farmer has to sell or whatever they want to buy. And when they are unable to provide a minimum support price to farmer, which is a price which should incentivize farmers into cultivating that crop again, then the government will step in and procure that. If that becomes the minimum procurement price or minimum support price, I think these 2 terms are now being intermingled. And yeah, so we have a kind of a price at which the government steps in and purchase. That becomes the MSP, as we call it popularly. The other part is that in the Mandi, there would be so much of volume, the volume would be so huge of the crop that flows in. To mop up that volume, because that is very difficult task. And nowadays, for instance, we produce roughly 298 million tons of food grains. So imagine if wheat and rice was to be at that volume, occupy that space in the mandis. How do you mop it up? So they set up what is called Food Corporation of India. The objective was that FCI will mop up that volume or that harvest or that surplus in the mandis, and then will use its channels to take that to the deficit areas through the PDS system. So this was a strategy which paid off very well in India. And of course, we all know that the rest is history. We are the seat of Green Revolution. And we emerged, or we became self-sufficient after this scheme was laid out, or after this structure was laid out.
So if I was to now come to scenarios, considering you've given us a lay of the land as to what the APMC is and how it functions. If you look at the first ordinance, the government, which is now on way to becoming a bill, the government has said that we are not going to try and shut the APMC. The farmer is free to come to this particular mandi, but the farmer is also free to go to a private buyer and sell it. Why is this so controversial? Isn't the farmer already doing it? Surely, if there are some statistics to go by, people would say that farmers are increasingly choosing to go to the private buyer and not come to the APMC.
Well, I completely agree with you. And as the government says that farmers would be given or provided with choices, and they can opt for any choice, and there will be competition in the market and so on. It looks very nice, hypothetically, to imagine that there is a scenario like this. But in reality, how does it operate? How does it work out? Let's see, ever since the Green Revolution days, the government of India had so far close to something around 7,000 APMC mandis in India. And if we have to provide a mandi at the 5-kilometer radius for the farmers, we actually need 42,000 mandis. So we only have 7,000 mandis. And according to the Shanta Kumar committee, to which I also presented myself before the Shanta Kumar committee, I remember Shanta Kumar committee had said that in India, only 6% farmers get minimum support price.
Okay.
94% farmers are in any case dependent on the markets. Now the question that should crop up is, if 94% farmers are dependent on the markets, and if the markets were so good, please tell me, why is agriculture going through a terrible agrarian crisis? from 1995 onwards, if we look into the NSSO reports, sorry, not the NSSO, but the National Crime Record Bureau reports, so far 3,64,000 farmers have committed suicide. Just gives you an idea of the extent of agrarian crisis that prevails in this country. The point I'm trying to make is, if only in that 7,000 mandis is what the farmer was bringing, and there was, of course, an area assigned along with it, where everything that the farmer produces should have been technically brought to the mandis. But in the remaining part of the country, and I'm sure you'll agree, 94% is not a small percentage of the farming population. If there were the only open markets already operating, I think, and if the markets were so good, why would the farmers not be happy with those markets? I think that's a question number one to be asked. If the farmers were happy with the prices being offered in those markets, why would they demand a higher MSP or demand that MSP should be, assured for them? The question is very clear. So let's understand. When you and me, go for a comfortable job and you have a assured job, why would I say that, I would like to become a Manrega worker? No, the question is, if he is happy with the price that the open market is providing, he would be very happy saying, oh, I don't need the MSP, I need the markets. But he's not saying that. He's not saying that. Clearly shows that the markets have not worked. And that, I think, is something to understand.
Devinder ji, I think there are 2 to 3 questions that pop out to anyone who's hearing this argument. Number one, we are saying that more and more of the farm produce is not going to the APMCs, it is going to private players, it is going outside the mandis. We also know that MSPs work only in the mandis. There is no way that private players can be pushed to give the MSP. We also know that the government is saying that the procurement system is not going to be dismantled. It is very much going to remain. Why are we believing that the procurement system the procurement system is not really acting as a buffer or as a cushion for the farmer if the majority of the farmer is going out of the APMC? अगर वो बाहर जा ही रहा है, तो अगर हम एक regulatory framework ले आते हैं, तो इसमें क्या दिक्कत है?
देखिए, you have actually raised 3 questions. And let me decipher it as simple words as I can. The first point that you raised is that farmer is already selling outside the market. The NSSO report, if you see one of those annual reports that they used to bring out in 2014-15, which is now 5 years back, and they had done a study for 2 years where they worked out that in the Kharif season, the paddy season, they had said that roughly, and if I remember the table correctly, it had said that 54 to 84% of the Kharif crops were being sold outside the mandis to private traders.
Okay.
Let's be very clear. In the mandis, as I explained, the Shanta Kumar committee's, I mentioned the Shanta Kumar committee's report, only 6% was being purchased or farmers were getting MSP. But let me also make clear. The government announces MSP for 23 crops every year.
Yes.
Out of which only 2 crops are procured, which means which is wheat and paddy, which means effectively it is implemented for 2 crops only, wheat and paddy. The remaining crops, some pulses, of course, the government would buy, or some other crops when there's a political pressure they buy. But otherwise, it is just a kind of a notional price that is made up. And the second part is that the procurement in the mandis is only for wheat and paddy. Don't forget that. So when we say that the farmer should go and sell outside, and if he gets a good price, fine. If he doesn't get a good price, he should come back to Mandi and sell. Well, he can't do that. Simple reason is that in Mandi, he can sell, but there's no procurement by the government. So he sells at the price the market provides. Now, let me illustrate that. The maize crop, for instance, is a crop that is being cultivated in the northern regions of India. There is MSP for maize, which is about 1,850 rupees per quintal nowadays. And 1,850 rupees, what the farmers are getting in Punjab, what the farmers are getting in Madhya Pradesh, what the farmers are getting in Bihar is about 800, 900, 1,000 rupees per quintal. Now, please answer me. What should the farmer do now? If he goes outside the mandi, he gets 800, 900 or 1,000 rupees. If he comes in the mandi, he gets 800, 900 or 1,000 rupees in the mandi also. The point is that unless the government procures, MSP has no meaning.
Yeah, so which
So
is why my question is that the procurement really is not a safety cushion for the farmer.
I must clarify. I think what you meant was that the MSP itself is not a safety cushion,
yes,
whereas the procurement is. Procurement is. So if there is a procurement for all crops for which MSP announced, the farmers would be very happy. So or make it a point that, you know, because we want to help the farmers, and farmers constitute 50% of the population of the country, which means 600 million or 60 crore is the total dependency on agriculture. And 60 crore people, imagine if they were to get a higher income in their hand, what will happen to the economy? After all, that money is going to flow into the markets. So I think let's be very clear. The farmer's dilemma is that he wants an assured income, like you and me. Every month we get assured income. So why shouldn't the farmer also get an assured package every month? Why should he be left to face the volatility of markets? And, you know, it is easy for people when I read on the Twitter that, you know, let the market supply demand operate and so on and so forth. Let me be very clear that, you know, the farmer is born in debt, he dies in debt. And as one farmer wrote to me from America, he said that living in debt that all around your life is what actually hell is. And I think we should understand this. Living in debt all around it, all through your life is what hell is. And I think these people have practiced, or they are aware of what hell is. And I think we in cities don't even understand what it means. When the farmer working very hard for 3 months grows a tomato crop, and he has done a remarkable job, let's say producing a higher productivity. And when he goes to the Mandi, prices have crashed. And when he throws his tomato onto the streets, do we as Indians ever sympathize or stand up with those farmers? The answer is no. For us, the answer, every time I get the answer, so what? This keeps on happening every 2-3 years. Look at it, how casually we say it keeps on happening every 2-3 years. If you don't pay the government employees 1 month's salary, you see the hangama in the country. And look at it, how we treat farmers.
Devinder ji, I want to bring in another argument. Farmers are saying that this particular set of bills is the government's way of moving closer towards taking away the traditional role of the MSP or being a guarantor of the MSP. The government has come out with multiple statements, including the Prime Minister, that the MSP is not going anywhere. How have we reached that conclusion that all of these bills are taking us in that direction?
See, I think let's be very clear, first of all, Anubha, that the farmer is the best economist. He knows where the shoe pinches. He knows what the ground realities are. He also understands the political dimension of whatever is happening around him. Let's not think that he is a fool. We normally believe he doesn't know, he's being misled by people and so on and so forth. You know, if you have read the reports of why marginal farmers have joined this demonstration or protest, you know, do you think even those people who are illiterate, they also know how the private trade has been extracting their pound of flesh from them? They are aware of it. For generation after generation, they have faced this. Now imagine in a state like Punjab, you know, in 3 generations, 5 farmers have committed suicide. Now, can we even imagine what happens in that family, that in 3 generations, 5 farmers have committed suicide, one after another? And that means for 3 generations, it's I would say 3 generations loss, you know, and we haven't understood why it is happening. If what the farmers are saying and what the government is saying. Now, the government is saying the MSP will not go away, the APMC will remain. No denial about it. The point the farmers are saying is, when you have APMC Mandis, and you have 2 systems operating. One is within the APMC Mandi, one is outside the APMC Mandi. Because the government says outside the APMC Mandi, there will be no tax, which means now you have 1 country, 2 markets. One within the APMC, one outside the APMC. Now what happens, Anubha, is that there is a tax that the trader has to pay in the Mandi. Yes. And which would be, let's say in Punjab, it is 6% on average. It can be lesser than that for crops like basmati rice or cotton and so on. But in various other states, it will be around 4% or so, okay, in Haryana and other states. Now, the interesting part is, in Punjab, after the government came up with these ordinances, the basmati exporters who procure a crop of about 100 crores from Punjab alone have already said that they are not going to buy basmati from within the mandi, because unless the government removes 4.5% tax. Okay. Now in Haryana also they are under the same pressure. The government has already promised that they will bring this tax to 1%. Now there are cotton ginning and spinning mills saying that we will not purchase cotton in the mandis. We will purchase outside the mandis unless you reduce the tax. Then there is the All India Rice Exporters Association, which is saying we will also not procure paddy unless you waive off these duties within the mandi. So what is happening is the mandi structure is dependent on the tax it collects from the traders. And that tax, let's say I give you the example of Punjab, it is about 3,500 crores to 3,600 crores every year. Now that money is used for upkeep of 1,840 mandis in Punjab and roughly about 140 mandis, and also the village road network in Punjab. It has a beautiful village road network linking the villages to the mandis. Now that also is maintained out of that fund. Then there is a rural development fund which is required for any exigency and so on and so forth. Now if that all goes away, states have no money. There is no, you know what is happening under GST. So if there is no money for maintaining the mandis, so obviously the mandis become redundant. They are headed towards a collapse. When there are no mandis, tell me, where will the MSP be delivered? That is one. Secondly, the government is already saying, the chief economic advisor has gone on record. He has said that we provide rations to 67% of the country, of the population under the National Food Security Act every year. He's saying, let us reduce it to 20% of the population, which means your requirement for PDS food will be drastically reduced. So which means you don't need to procure that kind of a food stuff. So which means the MSP is getting a slot or a sort two sides. And then there is APMC is becoming redundant. So farmers are aware of this. They are not foolish. So that is why they are saying the government, also let's not forget, you know, whenever you want to give a radical solution to the country, you don't want to give, as Govinda, film star Govinda, I remember one of his advertisements. He said, "Jor ka jhatka dheere se." We know that. So, jor ka jhatka dheere se, gradually these mandis will go away. And don't think that it is only the farmer's imagination. I have number of times interacted or have been places where the industry people are there, and they are always saying that MSP is coming in the way of price realization. So MSP should be done away.
So I think you're making extremely important points there, and you're giving us the fallout that if the APMC structure is diluted or becomes less effective, we could be on the road of the MSP coming under assault. Devinder, I have some nuts and bolts questions, and I want you to give sort of quick responses to that. Are we to believe that the APMCs by themselves are model structures and they don't have any problems, that there is no problems of cartelization, that the commission agents who work there, the Aratyas, they have sort of not exploited the farmers in any way? I know that there is a clip of the late Sushma Swaraj in Parliament doing the rounds where she's talking about the role that the Aratyas play in village life and how the farmer deals with them, that this is a person of trust, कि अगर आपको अपनी बहन की शादी के लिए पैसा चाहिए तो आप उसके पास जाएंगे, अगर आपको छत बनवानी है तो आप उसके पास जाएंगे, वो आपको पैसा दे देगा क्योंकि आपकी फसल आएगी उसके पास. Are we to believe that this is some model system that doesn't need any change?
I completely agree with what you say, and I remember Sushma Swaraj ji, and we have had a number of discussions when she was alive and discussing all these issues. And when she made this statement in Parliament, I still remember this was a very, very important statement that she made. The Artiya in Punjab or Haryana or wherever in the rest of the country plays a dual role, you know, and he is definitely a savior for the farming community at difficult times. But yes, I agree with you. And if you have read my articles or seen me on various videos, I have been saying that APMC suffers from cartelization, suffer from mafias and so on and so forth. There is a need to reform the APMC. I completely agree. There's a need to reform the APMC. That is what is actually required. To throw away the APMC is not the answer. A. B, you know, it's very interesting, Anubha, that people despise the Artiya who is wearing dhoti and kurta. But they love the Artiya or the middleman who is wearing a tie and a suit. Tell me, is Walmart not a middleman? Is Amazon not a middleman? Is Flipkart not a middleman? Is Big Basket not a middleman? Is you're not a middleman. Startups are not a middleman. They're all middlemen. And now we have a huge battery of middlemen which actually wants to replace the traditional middleman. I know we are looking at agriculture as an employment opportunity for this class of people. I'm not against it. But all I'm trying to say is middleman will always walk away with its own pound of flesh. So let us not denigrate one with another. We need to reform this system. We need to reform the structure. That is what we are asking. And that is what is the crime we need.
But what happens, Devinder ji, in other states where the APMC or the APMC network is not strong? Like what happens in a state like Bihar, where I believe that the APMC has not been as effective? Wahan kya hota?
It is not that in Bihar, APMC is not effective. In 2006, since I was looking into agriculture all these decades, 2006, there was an excitement in the country. There was an excitement in the country that Bihar is now going to become a role model for the country. And because we are throwing away the APMC Act, they had an APMC Act, they threw away the APMC Act and then opened up the state to private investments. Private mandis would be formed. There would be price discovery. All these things were said for Bihar. It has been 14 years now. 14 years, if you look at it in Bihar, every year, I think this will give you a clear answer. Every year, there are reports appearing in newspapers in Punjab and Haryana, or in Punjab newspapers, that truckloads of wheat and rice are carried by traders illegally to Punjab and Haryana to be sold here. Because here, at least you get the MSP. Let us say the MSP in wheat, for wheat is 1925 rupees per quintal. In Bihar, the farmer works very hard. And then what he gets is 1500, 1400, 1300 and so on. So traders find it, they only can take that effort to bring the produce and sell it in the mandis, and they do it in Punjab mandis. That's clearly example that if the markets had done remarkably well, let's say, or even well, 94% of the areas where the farmers were outside the MSP getting farmers were working on or were cultivating or marketing their produce. I'm sure you would agree that Bihar farmers should have been richer than or better than the Punjab farmers. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is, when you saw the reverse migration this year, that tragic scenes of people walking hundreds of kilometers, 8 crore people went back to their areas, to their villages. We know that bulk of it, 40 to 50% went back to Bihar. Imagine if in 14 years, instead of waiting for the private investment, if the state had gone for an APMC, gone for setting up the mandis, given the MSP to farmers, I bet, Anubha, the reverse migration would have been far, far less, because if agriculture becomes economically viable, why would people abandon their profession and move on looking for a menial job? And this is not only Bihar. It is in the rest of the country, and that is why the 94% where the farmers sell their crops, they are not demanding that markets are the answer.
I want to stitch this conversation towards its end, Devinder ji. Before I came to talk to you, I was reading up a lot of places. Isn't there any mechanism for the state to actually tell traders to give or to ensure that farmers get a particular price, an MSP price or an MSP higher price? Isn't there any mechanism? I read some examples of Maharashtra where when the state government tried to enforce this for traders, they simply went on strike. Is there no way that we can bring in a system where, let's say the APMC continues to exist, which has some kind of a regulatory framework, but outside too, we are not letting farmers sort of be at the mercy of traders?
Can I make some other observation, if you allow me,
Sure.
just to illustrate what the point that I'm driving at, and then we come to this question, which is very important. What is the way ahead, as you rightly mentioned, but you be asking for or seeking my suggestion. Let's be very clear that we have actually the kind of reforms that we are trying to bring in have been cut and paste from America and Europe. I have always said this, that for the last 7 decades, there has been open market systems operating in America. And people in India, I'm shocked, none of them, at least that I talk to on the media and elsewhere, are aware that farmers are in great distress in America. And I think, let me give you an illustration. There is no APMC in America. There is no MSP in America. It's open market. Open market for 7 decades. The chief economist of the US Department of Agriculture, he has gone on record saying, and I can bring that reference also if I need to. He says that since the 1960s, the farm incomes in America has been on a steep decline. And if you look today, the farmers are bankrupt now in America. The bankruptcy, total bankruptcy is $425 billion. The rate of suicide in America is 45% higher in rural America than in urban America. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, which is a collective of all the unions and so on, the 87% farmers have told that federation that they want to quit or abandon agriculture. And if you look at how sophisticated the technology and usage and everything there in America was, we have the Walmart in America, which has no stock limits. We have the commodity trading in America. The biggest commodity exchange is in Chicago. We have, of course, contract farming and so on. And look at it that American agriculture is now surviving on subsidies. If you withdraw this subsidy support, agriculture collapses. Every farmer in America is getting on average $60,000 of subsidy. And in India, the farmer is getting about $200 as subsidy. Now, in Europe, the same phenomena is operating in Europe. I just give you one example that it is not the markets there. If they were efficient, I'm sure you will agree, no government would like to provide subsidies in agriculture, whether it's America or whether it's India. Now, in America and Europe, a Untied India study in 2007 had shown that if you withdraw the green box subsidies under WTO, it's WTO language, green box subsidies, then what happens is that the agriculture exports from America, Canada, and Europe will fall by 40%. Now that tells you very clearly that not only agriculture in America and the rich countries, even the agriculture exports are actually backed by subsidies. Withdraw these subsidies, the markets collapse. That's the point I'm trying to make. My point is, if markets have not done any favor to or benefit to the farmers in America and Europe, please tell me where the average land holding size is 444 acres. Please tell me the same model, how will that be helpful for Indian farmers, where 86% farmers have a land holding size of less than 5 acres. That is one. Now, this tells us that markets have failed the farmers everywhere in the world. Now, the other question, which is, I think, very important. Can't government of India provide a kind of a mechanism or develop a kind of a mechanism where markets operate in a way that they are, as you rightly said, they are regulated, they benefit farmers and so on. I think that's an excellent way of thinking, and that is what Indian farmers are crying for. Let's look at it. Every time I go to a television show, and last 4 days have been hectic, you know, the people who are representing the industry would say, oh, the farmers are being misled. You know, once these reforms come into place, you will see that the farmers will get a much higher price than the MSP. This is what they are telling. And when I ask them, okay, if you are saying that you have undergone a heart transplant, because all these decades you didn't pay a better price, now you are saying you'll be paying a better price. Now I agree with you. But if you are saying you're going to pay a better price to farmers, which means higher than MSP, then why don't you also demand along with the farmers that let's make MSP a legal right for farmers, that there will be no trading happening, whether in Maharashtra mandis or whether in Punjab mandis, no trading happening below the MSP. Then they go quiet. That is not honesty of purpose. We know that that is not going to happen. You can't put the sheep before the wolves. So we all know that. So that is why we are saying that we need to bring in a 4th ordinance or a 4th law, which makes MSP obligatory in this country for trading. Give farmers a money, their due wealth or their due income in their hand. And I can believe me, agriculture is the sector which can reboot the entire economy. Just before I go, let me give you one statistics. Between 2000 and 2016-17, 16-year period, then OECD report along with the ICRIER in New Delhi tells us that Indian farmers lost 45 lakh crore. Did you see a discussion on any of the TV channels? 45 lakh crore. Imagine if this had happened to the industry, what would have happened in this country? 45 lakh crore, and that, if you read the report carefully, is because farmers got 15% less income than what they were expecting or what they should have got. 45 lakh crore is the loss. Imagine people surviving without getting a pay rise or without getting a hike in their incomes year after year, decade after decade. Isn't this an opportunity, historic opportunity, as the Prime Minister said? Let us create an opportunity, a watershed movement, when Indian farmers also become compatible or are able to get a kind of income share in the entire package, in the entire kitty of the country, as much as the government employees get, or the professors in the university get, or the media executives get. Why not? Why not? They also have an equal right. And I think that is only possible when the Prime Minister says Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. I'm completely with him. When he says we need to bring in Atmanirbharta, I'm completely with him. And I think the route passes through agriculture. So let us make agriculture economically viable, make it mandatory that there will be no trading before MSP, and you will see the country's economic growth not only stuck at 5 or 6%, but galloping at 15 to 20%.
Fair enough.
60 population.
Let me just interrupt here to get a quick response from you as to what you believe the next couple of days look like, considering two of these bills have already gone through Rajya Sabha. They'll go to the president, they'll become a bill. I'm not quite sure at the time of this recording what is the status of the third one. But now with this sort of regulatory framework almost in the offing, what do you expect will happen in the days ahead?
Well, I think, like you said, or like your guess is as good as mine. I think at the same time we must understand that in a democracy, you have an opportunity, or you must use that opportunity to go and talk to the agitating farmers. You know, the farm agitation in Punjab and Haryana is now expanding through the country. With not only Rajasthan, not only UP, it has now gone across to Madhya Pradesh, it has gone to Karnataka today. There's a huge protest happening in Karnataka. It will swell across the country. And I think here is an opportunity.
So that's the counter that is given often, that this particular agitation or this particular farmers' protest has roughly been concentrated on two states, Punjab and Haryana, primarily because they work around the MSP very, very strongly. You're saying that's incorrect. It is a nationwide farmers' protest of sorts, so fast becoming one.
I remember an NSO study some years back which said that 70% farmers in India do not even know what is MSP. So understand that you know, MSP was confined to these green revolution areas, and that is why people outside, because the markets were operating there, they didn't know what MSP is about. But I think over the years, when the demand for Swaminathan Commission recommendation to be followed and so on, the message has percolated to the masses. And now gradually people outside this region, northwestern region, are also understanding that the MSP there, let's say Karnataka farmers also partly get MSP for some crops, and so in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and so on. So people are now realizing, understanding, and therefore there is a kind of a uproar happening. And I think all I'm saying is, in a democracy, instead of silencing those voices, I think more important is, let's involve them in the process. Let's understand from them what is paining them, what is their fear, and let's try to modify the laws to see that benefits the traders as well as the farmers. I don't think there's any problem if the trade can buy over MSP and the farmer gets a assured price by way of MSP. What is the problem? Both the sections are benefited, the nation is benefited. I think that's the way forward.
Fair enough. Devinder Sharma, thank you very much for your time, for your kind patience, for explaining the very, very simple nuances to us. As always, if you've been watching, remember you can subscribe to us. We're also putting much of this content on our Instagram channel, and there we are called Newsworthy with AB. If there are any more questions, and if you think we need another masterclass with Devinder Sharma, because we haven't really gone into the other two ordinances, we've remained centered around the APMC, the first bill, and the MSP, because that's at the heart of these protests. Drop us a mail and we'll try and get him once again for this conversation. But Devinder ji, thank you very much for your time and for this analysis.